channel about the intersection of the ordinary and the spiritual. A little trouble with the live stream setting up here, but it should be okay now. This week, we're going to be discussing quotes on the topic of psychism or psychic powers, both in the higher and lower sense, from the writings of Alice Bailey. And you can find the quotes I'll be considering on my Instagram or my Minds. The link to that is in the description below. Without further ado, we'll move into the first quote for consideration. Okay. The angle of the contacts which become possible upon the path of accepted discipleship are well known, but cannot be described in too much detail. They vary according to person and ray. I would only ask you to have these modes of approach in mind, remembering that they do occur and occur in varying degrees of clarity at various stages upon the path. They are, as you know, a dream experience, a symbolic teaching, the thought form of a master, the direct contact with a master in meditation, and an interview in a master's ashram. The first three are more usually the experience of the probationary disciple. The last two are undergone by the accepted disciple. They have their astral or lower psychic counterparts. They are, in this case, not all glamour and illusion, and are not basically reprehensible, for they are in reality the seed or the guarantee of future inevitable experience upon the way. People do see thought forms of the masters, for those thought forms exist. They do receive symbolic teachings upon the astral plane or even in dream states. Beginners and the inexperienced are then apt to do one of two things: overestimate the experience and believe it to indicate a high spiritual development. They begin to lean upon the experience and to substitute this astral happening for the future reality, or they dismiss it as undesirable lower psychism, forgetting that so-called lower psychism is only so when the interpretation and the use of the experience is at fault. It is the task of the accepted disciple to aid in the interpreting, to indicate direction, and to point out the significance of the experience to the neophyte. Workers in the spiritual field should bear this carefully in mind and remember that, as a result of the war, he's referring to World War II, of tension, of aspiration towards the new age, these dreams, visions, and these episodes of symbolic teaching, these contacts with thought forms will steadily increase, are indicative of growth and of expansion. Undirected, unexplained, and misinterpreted or laughed down and ridiculed, they can greatly hinder and can be forced to descend into the category of true lower psychism. Rightly interpreted and explained, they can constitute a series of graded revelations upon the way to light. They exist then as guarantees of future knowledge and as signposts to relative achievement, but they are not the reality when astrally focused. So this is interesting because he's looking at lower psychism from kind of a few different viewpoints. And there's the viewpoint that it's generally undesirable, but he's making a sort of clarification that if it's interpreted incorrectly or given the wrong significance, then it's undesirable. But it's sort of a natural process of unfolding. And specifically here, he's talking about the path of discipleship, and you might see an image of the master or have sort of a symbolic dream or something like that. And those things might not be the sort of highest experience. They might be a shadow of a future experience. But if you sort of suppress those things as undesirable and not real, you're creating a wrong flow of energy. So it's important to accept them and allow for them, but to not if they're in a kind of astral emotional wavelength, to not regard them as like a super high thing and I'm so enlightened now and that sort of deal. So that's one aspect on this higher and lower psychism he's touching on here. And if you have any comments or questions, just post them in the chat. I'll try to respond to all of them. But moving on to the next quote. Even these three are external to the true seedless meditation, or samadhi, which is not based on an object. It is free from the effects of the discriminating nature of the chitta or the mind stuff. In all previous stages, the thinker has been aware of both himself, the knower, and of the field of knowledge. In the earliest stage, he is aware of triplicity, for the instrument of knowledge was likewise recognized, later to be transcended and forgotten. Now comes the final stage. The object of all yoga practices where unity is known and even duality is seen to be a limitation. Naught remains but awareness of the self, of that omniscient, omnipotent knower who is one with the all and whose very nature is awareness and energy. As has well been said, quote, there are therefore these two types of perception, that of living things and that of the life, that of the soul's work and that of the soul itself, end quote. The expounder of yoga is now desirous of describing the results of meditation, some along the line of higher psychism and some along the line of lower. The next 7 sutras therefore deal with the nature of the objects seen and the control of the mind as the real man seeks to focus the illuminating ray of his mind upon them. In studying these results of meditation in the psychic realm, it should be borne in mind that the 8 means of yoga do produce definite effects in the lower nature, and that this causes certain unfoldments and experiences to take place. These put the aspirant more consciously in rapport with the interior planes in the 3 worlds, meaning the mental, emotional, and physical. This is safe and necessary process provided it is the outcome of the awakening of the man on his own plane, and the turning of the eye of the soul via the mind and the third eye upon these planes. The presence of the lower psychic power may, however, mean that the soul is, from a physical standpoint, asleep and unable to use its instrument, and that these experiences are therefore only the result of the activity of the solar plexus, producing awareness of the astral plane. This type of psychism is a reversal of the animal state and to the child state, is a reversion to the animal state and the child state of the human race, and it is undesirable and dangerous. So when the soul is awakened, when it's focusing down on the 3 planes of the mind, the emotions, and the physical body, these lower psychic powers can be used from that place of the soul, not from personality, intentions, or desires. But if they can just be awakened on their own without the soul being active and controlling things, and they could look the same to people. People could see things that from far away, or perceive what people are thinking, but it's not from the soul, even though it might outwardly appear the same. And he says it's kind of a reversion to an animal or a child state. That these lower powers can be unfolded for the soul's use later when the soul is developed, but in a previous level of evolution, the sort of animal or child consciousness had use of these things. So we will move on to the next quote. I do say with emphasis that a more careful and wise training is needed and a more intelligent use of the knowledge which is available if sought after. I appeal to all who are interested in the study of psychic knowledge to study and think and experiment and teach and learn until such time as the entire level of psychic phenomenon has been lifted out of its present ignorant, speculative, and negative position into one of potent assurance, proved technique, and spiritual expression. I appeal to such movements as the psychical research societies in the world and the vast spiritualistic movement to lay the emphasis on divine expression and not so much on phenomenon. Let them approach the subject from the angle of service and carry their research into the realm of energy and cease to pander so much to the public. The opportunity offered them is great, and the need of their work is vital. The service rendered has been real and essential, but if these movements are to avail themselves of the coming inflow of spiritual energy, they must shift their attention into the realm of true values. The training of the intellect and the presenting to the world of a group of intelligent psychics should be a main objective, and the astral plane will then be, for them, only a stage on the way to that world wherein the spiritual guides and the masters are found. And from thence all souls go forth into incarnation, and all souls return from the place of experience and experiment. So the Tibetan has a lot of suggestions for organizations in the world, and this is one of them. And it caught my attention because psychics are kind of seen as silly or maligned or and obviously fraud sometimes, or maybe often. Um, but there's not a lot of genuine service and focusing on a divine expression. Like people are more interested in the lower phenomenon instead of using powers for the service of mankind or for intelligently training people on how to develop these things wisely and safely. And I'm sure there's some organizations out there that have moved in this direction. I know there's the Monroe Institute. I'm not sure how focused they are on some of these values, but that's one modern day thing. Um, but there's so much opportunity if we would shift our vision to higher, truer things. But often we're focused on the lower. We're focused on getting more money for ourselves or maybe people we love in our close sphere instead of um, developing wealth for the greater good or others. And yeah, it's unfortunate, but I guess we'll move on to the next quote. But there's just so much potential that we could achieve as humanity if we'd be willing to change our vision and focus even just a little. Stage 4, the Chila on the thread. With these preliminary remarks, let us pass on to another stage of the path of discipleship. The fourth stage is described as follows. The stage wherein the disciple is taught how, in emergencies, to attract the master's attention. This is the peculiar name of the Chila on the thread. The whole question of psychic sensitivity of the higher kind is involved at this stage. I have taught in my writings most clearly and definitely the undesirability of lower psychic experiences. This has been done as the need to warn aspirants anent this matter is great. The difficulty enhanced by the fact that lower psychics are not easily reached and warned, as they are ever determined that their clairvoyant and clairaudient powers are indicative of the advanced type of high spiritual unfoldment. Their minds are closed to all warnings, and they function often behind a barrier of smug self-satisfaction. They forget that the aboriginal races and animals are all psychic and register that which the more mental types fail to record. The rank and file of the people are inherently astral in their activities, in their interpretations of phenomena, and their attitudes and focus. It is necessary, then, to enforce the warning and awaken the average psychic to the undesirability of his astral life. And yeah, despite the previous quotes, which sort of give a different context to lower psychism, the Tibetan often warns how it's not useful and it's not indicative of anything higher in reality. And here he expounds on that. And that any true impressions of the soul or the real psyche, which might come to you and warn you about that, to like cool off the lower psychic powers or whatever, if you have those developed, that can even be inhibited by, being smug about it or so pleased that you have these things. And so they sort of block out the higher light from showing you that you're going astray. Continuing on, disciples, however, put no aspect of divine manifestation outside their range of experience. They know that psychism in its lowest phases is a part of the divine expression and it is of an essentially higher nature than the purely physical processes of the living in the body. A disciple cannot say that now, because he is a disciple, he will not be subject to this, that, or the other experience. He has to be prepared for all experiences and to face the fact that eventually all disciples have to become psychics, both higher and lower, as was the Christ. The only safeguard for which he works is to prevent the lower powers demonstrating until the higher psychic faculties are functioning. Then the lower are controlled and operated, if I might so express it, from the levels of the higher consciousness. There is, to the mind of the disciple, only life and form, and he is learning to handle the life process through the medium of the form, so as to produce a divine manifestation. So there comes a time when, in the stage of development, maybe over lifetimes, maybe in one particular lifetime, where you have to let go of the lower psychic powers and develop the use of the mind and the faculty of discrimination and intellect, which sort of shut off the lower psychic powers. And after that stage of building up the mind and reasoning, when you've developed the soul consciousness or your connection to your soul to a degree, then at certain points, the lower psychic powers can actually be employed and developed and brought back into the consciousness once again for the purposes of the soul. But it comes back to everything in its right place. In a certain way, it can be wrong. In another situation, it can be good. And so it's all about seeing it from the correct perspective. And by the way, if you're enjoying the stream, please leave a like on it. It really helps get the channel and the video out to more people and these ideas, which hopefully more people will become aware of. But on to the last quote. Quote, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made in him." John 1:2. Hope I'm saying that right. Don't want to have a 2 Corinthians moment here. Here in the Christian Bible is the substance of the entire teaching, and in the significance of the 3 letters of the sacred word, A.U.M, lies the clue to the entire cosmic process. The meditation process, when duly and correctly carried out, reveals, therefore, the second or the soul aspect, and the sound or the word, the voice of silence, can then be heard. Once heard, and the work carried steadily forward, the realm of consciousness is revealed, and the yogi is in rapport with the second aspect of his own nature, and with the second aspect in every form, second aspect being the soul. This is the basis of the whole science of the soul, and leads a man to know his own soul or psyche, and the psyche in every form of divine life. It is the foundation for the entire science of psychism, both in its higher and lower aspects. When a man is a lower psychic, he is aware of and responds to the soul aspect of the material form, and the third or Brahma aspect, the body, dominates, for every atom of matter has a soul. This concerns all that is subhuman. When he responds to the higher correspondence of this, to the reality of which the lower is but the shadow, he is in touch with the Christ consciousness, with the soul of his being, which is one with the soul of all the superhuman kingdoms. In connection with this, 2 things must be remembered. If he is a lower psychic, he is in touch with the second aspect of the lower man, the astral body, the middle principle in the lower man, linking the mental body and the etheric. He is therefore in rapport with all that can be contacted on that plane, the astral plane. If, however, he is a higher psychic, he is in rapport with the second aspect of divine manifestation, the ego or soul on its own plane, mediating between the linking the monad with the personality, spirit with the body. It is interesting here to note that a clue to the truth of this can be found in the manifestations of lower psychism, such as are seen in the average mediumistic seance and the ordinary type of spiritualism. Contact with the astral plane is made through that great center, the solar plexus, which links the 3 higher centers and the lower. It accounts also for the fact that flowers are such a feature in materialization at seances, for the vegetable kingdom is the middle kingdom of the 3 subhuman kingdoms, mineral, vegetable, and animal. The explanation as to the prevalence of Indian guides is also found here, for they are the shells and the powerful thought forms left by the second of the 3 strictly human races, Lemurian, Atlantean, and Aryan. No Lemurian shells or thought forms are left now, but many Atlantean shells are to be found preserved through the use of certain forms of Atlantean magic. So before getting onto this shell Atlantean magic stuff, it's interesting the correspondence of the number two here, or the middle principle. So the solar plexus links the higher and lower in a lower sense. The soul links the higher and the lower in another sense. And then he brings in the idea of plants or vegetables being used and materialized in seances because those link the subhuman kingdoms. It links the mineral and the animal, or it's in the middle part there. So this kind of numerology or numbers, you see this played out and reflected, and I'm sure there's much more to consider here than I'm aware of, but it's interesting nonetheless from this point of consideration. But yeah, so he talks about Indian guides, and I believe he's talking about Indian guides like in a seance, like they have a seance and some Indian guide shows up and communicates with them. And what he's saying is that these guides are in fact these kind of thought forms or astral or emotional shells. I was talking with Cyrus Ryan the other day, and he let me know some details about this stuff because I didn't have it all figured out myself. But that in Atlantean times, certain psychics or magicians crystallized their astral or emotional body, or created maybe a duplicate of it that was crystallized. And these things became sort of concretized on the astral plane so that they endured after their physical death. And these things could later, by that same individual in incarnation, be drawn in, and they could get the experience or the power that was held in that shell or thought form. It even has to do with psychic vampirism, I think. I read this book by Michelle Belanger, and she was talking about how these like priests and stuff in Atlantean times had did something to their energy bodies that made them remember their past lives in the future, but it also turned them into psychic vampires. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, so these shells exist out there that were created in Atlantean times. So that's pretty interesting. So some of these spirits out there aren't actually living spirits per se, but they're these sort of constructs, if you will, that might be taken over by devas or elemental lives and used in certain ways. But that's more stuff along the lines of lower psychism. I hope this live stream was illuminative on the difference between higher and lower psychism and the whys and the wherefores. There's obviously a lot more to discover, and if you have any comments or questions, let me know in the chat below. But until next time, leave a like on this video, subscribe, and for Joshua's Magic, may the force be with you.